The fall of 1938 marked the 50th full multi-game season for DePauw's football program. It started with 3 games, which the Tigers won by a combined score of 101-6. This vintage film archives the October 1st, 1938 dismantling of Evansville. The Tigers logged some impressive scores in this game, which the home team won 41-0. The DePauw band and fans marched through the streets of downtown Indianapolis before the Butler game, which began a parade of 3 losses for the black and gold. A win over Earlham made the Tigers 4-3 before the big annual grudge match. Wabash, on the other hand, was 1-5-1. The Little Giants scored just 8 points in their first 6 games. The week before the Bell Battle, they logged their first victory, a 32-14 triumph over Rose Poly. On the bright side, the Crawfordsville campus's newest addition, Goodrich Hall, opened. It boasted modern facilities for the teaching of physics and chemistry. On Monon Saturday, Elmer Botkin, who played center for the Tigers in 1889, returned a half-century later to see what this game was all about. A Wabash fumble at their own 45-yard line led to the contest's only scoring drive, culminating in a 2-yard scamper around the left end by the Tigers' Johnny Scott. DePauw amassed 258 yards from scrimmage on the day to the Little Giants' 95 and had 14 first downs compared to 3. Joe Barr, who later became U.S. Treasury Secretary, posed with the winner's bounty after this one was over. These vintage photographs from the fall of 1939 show DePauw coach Gaumy Neal putting his troops through their paces in practice, and the Tigers enjoying some hard-earned R&R. DePauw, seen here against Ohio Wesleyan in 1939, came into the battle for the bell with 3 wins, 3 losses, and 1 tie. Under coach Pete Vaughn, Wabash had a 3-4-1 record. That takes us to game day. Newspaper accounts report that DePauw sent 18 players to Crawfordsville for the contest, and it turned out to be a tough defensive struggle. The lone score came when DePauw's Art Lavage threw a touchdown pass to team captain Joe Edwards. The 1930s end with a second consecutive 7-0 DePauw victory, and the Tigers celebrating possession of the Monon Bell for a 3rd straight year. In 1940, razzle-dazzle was the order of the day, as DePauw's Art Lavage fools Wabash and the cameraman on this fake reverse. His dodgy dart toward pay dirt puts DePauw ahead 7-3. Not to be outdone, Wabash's Walt Gray is running with the ball. As he's hit, he laterals to the Little Giant quarterback, Bill Sabo, who takes the pigskin into the end zone, and all of a sudden it's 10-7 Little Giants. The lead yo-yos back to DePauw when, after a very deep drop, Lavage connects with Frank Gregg on a 25-yard touchdown pass. He's all alone in the end zone. When the band takes the field, it's 13-10 DePauw, but a 4th quarter march by Wabash decides the game. Gray scores from 3 yards out as Wabash fans celebrate in the end zone. The Monon bell rings for them for the first time since 1936. In the spring and summer of 1941, crews worked to build a stadium at what was previously known as DePauw's Blackstock Field. This footage shows the $80,000 project as it began to take shape, and later as Tiger head coach Gaumy Neal, wearing a hat in these images, took a look around the facility before it opened to the public. Blackstock Stadium was dedicated on Old Gold Day, October 4th. With film, we can also revisit that day and see people buying their tickets and the ceremonies which featured the benefactor, Mrs. Ira Blackstock. Of course, this took place as headlines detailed mounting tensions in the world. Even DePauw's football team was enlisted on behalf of Uncle Sam. The men from Greencastle, who defeated Carleton on Old Gold Day and later topped Louisville, were a robust 6-1. Wabash was 4-3-1 as the two schools engaged in the 10th battle since this railroad bell became the rivalry's prize. This image shows the opening coin toss. DePauw quarterback Art Lavage took a hard hit early in the game and wasn't the same after. Wabash's Earl Dowd also had his bell rung, but he shook it off and, according to accounts, ripped the Bengal line to shreds all afternoon. After the contest, Dowd admitted he could remember very little about the first 3 quarters. Of course, 22 days later would come an attack on Pearl Harbor, which America would never forget. In 1942, with America at war, the men of DePauw and Wabash prepared for their annual battle on the gridiron, and a camera captured this look at a more innocent time. 1942 was the year Casablanca was released, and Bing Crosby's White Christmas was first heard. A first-class stamp was 3 cents, and the formations were different. An estimated 5,000 fans braved a chilly north wind as the undefeated Little Giants sought their first undisputed conference title in 15 years. The game's lone touchdown, a trick play that also worked for DePauw the year before, was not captured on film, but we can witness Wabash blocking the extra point attempt. The final, DePauw 6, Wabash 3. During World War II, DePauw University was a home and training camp for Naval Air Force cadets. And in the fall of 1943, Uncle Sam turned the small school's football program into a national powerhouse. A key factor, Bob Stuber, an All-American halfback who led the University of Missouri to Big Six Conference championships in 1941 and 42. Stuber was a first-round pick of the Chicago Bears in April 1943 and played in their September 26th game against the Green Bay Packers. The very next day, the Navy sent him by train to Greencastle.
And we no sooner got into our barracks than a call came out on the bullhorn to report downstairs, and we went downstairs and they called by name each of the fellows that had played football in college. And they took us right out to the stadium. We met Gami Neal and they issued a uniform, and that was it. We played ball.
At that point, DePauw had played one game which ended in a scoreless tie, and somehow Stuber was allowed to resume his college career. At DePauw, he joined other football standouts called by the Navy, including George Petty of the 1943 College All-Stars. And the Tigers roared, receiving national media attention. They won all 5 games after Stuber's arrival by a combined score of 206-6. The halfback scored 129 points, that's almost 26 per game, to lead the nation in scoring, playing 5 games compared to the runner-ups 8. He averaged about 11 yards a carry and was also a proficient punter and passer.
A lot of glory was heaped upon me because I was making the touchdowns. But you know there's 10 other people there that got to be in the way of somebody else to get you to that point where you can do it.
The Monon Bell game was played in the middle of the short season. It saw Stuber score 25 points. He ran for 266 yards on 19 carries. And like the other blowouts, he saw limited playing time.
We could have done it a lot worse. Tommy stopped it. That could have been a 75-0 ball game with ease. But Gami wouldn't let us run the score.
Wabash was supposed to play DePauw again later in the season, but decided that one thrashing was enough and the contest was canceled. One of the game's all-time greats, Bob Stuber, is enshrined in the College Football Hall of Fame. In the summer of 1944, 55 men reported as DePauw's football training camp began. All but 3 were apprentice seamen in the Navy V-12 unit stationed at the university. Wabash entered the fall with a total student enrollment of 12. Add in the V-12 contingent, and there were still fewer than 300 men on the Crawfordsville campus. It was a time when the average worker made $2,400 a year. The average home cost less than $3,500, and the coming and going of Navy men meant this would be a very different DePauw team than the undefeated squad of the year before. The Tigers opened their season against Northwestern, and Gaumy Neal and his staff witnessed a 62-0 loss. Fans who streamed into Blackstock Stadium in 1944 had little reason to stand up besides the national anthem. Going into the battle with Wabash, the Little Giants' season finale, but the 5th of 8 games for DePauw, the Tigers were 0-4. Wabash had 3 wins, 1 loss, and 2 ties. On game day, DePauw went to the halftime locker room down 7-0. A 7-7 deadlock was broken in the 4th quarter when Wabash's Jim Allardyce raced for 31 yards and a game-winning touchdown, sending the prize of the rivalry back north on the Monon line. As World War II ended in the fall of 1945, the Navy V-12 unit at DePauw was scheduled to leave campus on November 1st. And that forced Gaumy Neal, the legendary coach entering his last season on the sidelines, to schedule only 5 games. That wasn't the only unusual thing as the 44 players on the Tiger roster prepared for battle in 1945. The Monon Bell game was the season opener that year, when the game day program sold for 10 cents and cheerleaders practiced on East College lawn. DePauw got the scoring started in the 2nd quarter when, on a fake field goal attempt, Bob Dobbins threw a 21-yard TD pass to Clint Bostic. In the 3rd period, Vance Van Dyne ran the ball in from 13 yards out. Wabash scored a touchdown late, but a 13-7 outcome gave the retiring coach his 9th victory over his alma mater. In a final odd twist, the Monon Bell did not actually change hands until the following fall, when a Wabash man presented the trophy to DePauw's student body president during the Tigers game with Butler. It was a year of transition for Wabash College football, where Pete Vaughn, the head coach since 1919, turned the reins over to Glenn Harmison. At DePauw, Gaumy Neal gave up his 16-year-long grip on the clipboard and became athletic director. The new head man, Robert Nipper, came to the Tigers from Indiana powerhouse Shortridge High School. For the first time since the beginning of World War II, Wabash held a homecoming. Crosses in front of this fraternity honored the war dead, and there was a rally on the courthouse square. This cold, wet afternoon was also the day of the Monon Bell contest. The Little Giants were led by this foursome of quarterback Frank Roman, lineman Joe Lovis, and Bill Duchan, all 3 school Hall of Famers, and halfback Norm Wilson, who ran for 2 touchdowns against DePauw in this Bell game. Jim Allardyce also scored twice, including a 95-yard interception return. The game was one of 6 Wabash shutouts in 1946. They also blanked Indiana State and Ball State en route to a 7-1 record. In the fall of 1947, the buzz in the DePauw locker room was over the school's 2nd new football coach in as many years, Mike Snavely. But campus chatter quickly turned to other topics, as there was no dancing around the fact that the Tigers were stumbling. They entered the annual grudge match with a 2-5 record and had been outscored on average 25-7. Wabash had 4 wins, a loss, and 2 ties heading into the battle for the Bell. 13 days after Howard Hughes' test flight of the H-4 Hercules, the 1947 version of this historic rivalry lifted off, but one team had stronger wings. The Little Giants scored 3 touchdowns in the first 2 periods. Wabash's Don Knutson started things with a 5-yard scoring run. Then Frank Roman pranced in untouched on a quarterback sneak from 34 yards out, writing a new chapter in the history of this series. The Monon Bell, which Wabash fans rang throughout the game, made even more noise as it headed back to Crawfordsville. Wabash's cheerleaders took a leap of faith, hoping the 4-3 Little Giants could keep the Bell and claim a winning season record. DePauw, led by coach Mike Snavely, was 5-2, but had outscored their opponents by just 3 points, 64-61, over the first 7 games. In an era when students took things seriously, whether they were studying or picking up their dates for very formal dances, as the leaves made their way to the ground, it was time to gather for an annual rite of fall, one of college football's greatest rivalries. Of course, the Monon Bell was once mounted on a train, and if you look closely at this game day photo, you'll see a locomotive in the background of what apparently was a failed field goal attempt. DePauw recovered a Wabash fumble in the first half and capitalized. John Baylor hit Chuck Veer with a 23-yard touchdown pass, and that's all the Tigers would need on this day. Wabash threatened but never scored, and when the final gun sounded, Snavely could celebrate his first Monon Bell victory. From appearances, 1949 seemed a tranquil time on a college campus. As DePauw students enjoyed a hobo hop, half a world away the USSR tested its first atomic bomb. As Indiana undergraduates learned Spanish, in China, communists prevailed in that country's civil war. The battlefield for DePauw was lined with losses that year. The Tigers entered the annual grudge match with Wabash with a 1-6 record. The Little Giants came into the season's final game with 4 consecutive wins after 2 losses and a tie to start the campaign. Upset-minded DePauw fans rallied in the streets of Greencastle hours before kickoff. The cover of the game day program suggested a contest that could be out of this world, and it wasn't far off. The visiting Little Giants grabbed a 13-0 lead. DePauw battled back and took a 21-19 advantage. Wabash blocked a kick late, and Norm Bucktenica tossed a 37-yard touchdown pass to put the visitors back in front. The DePauw yearbook has a diagram of this back-and-forth game. In possession of the ball and with time running out, the Tigers threw an interception, and the outcome was one for the history books.